So the smartphone industry is a competitive market. You've seen old and new companies come and go, and Honor, which was previously under Huawei's branding, is now an independent brand owned by groups of companies, meaning they are no longer under US ban, so all Honor devices come with Google and 5G support. But despite that, in the years of Honor's history, they are relatively young and new as an independent brand. So the challenge for them right now is to continue what Honor has built from the past and make them better for the future. So what's happening now is that Honor has been doing its best efforts to make itself known in the smartphone industry, hence the huge promotions, deals, and marketing you're seeing right now. And for a young independent company, it needs to leave a good impression first before it plays with the big boys. How are they doing that right now? Well, by offering the Honor 90. It's an upper mid-range tier phone that's priced at 24,999 pesos. Although it only comes in one model here in the Philippines, it's one of the few devices with a generous 512 gigabytes of internal storage and 12 gigabytes of RAM. For a phone, that's actually insane, you know? It basically has the same amount of storage as laptops, even more than the base model of Apple's MacBook lineups. But that's not all. As part of its pre-order program, it's bundling a JBL speaker worth 7,500 pesos. This made me think that this might be the best time to buy an Honor phone given their current situation. They need to rack up customers, so they're going to be generous as financially as possible. I mean, if you bought an Honor 70 last year, I feel bad for you because you paid for a more expensive phone. It was priced at 27,000 pesos. Now, the Honor 90 is a bit more affordable at 25,000 pesos, and you're getting a huge amount of RAM and storage, a huge 200 megapixel camera, a 50 megapixel ultra-wide selfie camera that can record up to 4K resolution, and a significantly better chipset in the Snapdragon 7 Gen 1 accelerated edition. So as a whole, Honor 90 is a good contender for the best upper mid-range phone under 25,000. If we're talking about a phone as a whole, like being good in everything, this is a solid contender. But the very first thing you will notice here is the design. So the general materials used here for the build are similar to last year's model. So it's the same plastic frame, same plastic backing. I still prefer glass if it's about feeling premium in the hands, but Honor made sure to not make it look cheap like other phones by adding a pattern that should exude luxury. And yes, it does look like a luxurious phone that would go well with a luxurious bag or wallet. This is called Diamond Silver, and I hated it at first, but after quite a while, I slowly started liking it. There's also the other color, Midnight Black, but the Emerald Green isn't available in stores at the moment. This is a glossy panel, so you can still see fingerprint smudges, but because of that pattern, it adds some kind of grip, and it feels a bit weird because I'm not used to feeling patterns on the back of my phone. There is no official IP rating on this phone, not even splash resistance, and there's also no microSD slot for expansion, which is not a problem since this has half a terabyte of storage. While there's also no headphone jack, Honor was kind enough to include an adapter in the box for free. It's not going to drive high impedance headphones like my Marshall monitor, but it's good enough for regular wired headphones. The camera hums are a bit prominent and make the phone wobble when laid flat on the table, which is as annoying as ever, but the design feels slim, solid, and seamless. In fact, it feels similar to some Samsung phones because the Honor 90 not only curves to the sides on the back, but also on the front. So the display slightly curves to the side, making this 6.7 inches feel a bit narrower and smaller than flat displays of the same size. It's now AMOLED, not OLED, but you still get the same quality, which are infinite contrast ratio, deep blacks, and saturated colors. It still supports 1 billion colors like last year's models and refreshes at 120 Hz. And if you're one of the bezel police, then yes, the bezels around the displays are thin. The top and bottom parts are not symmetrical if you are to nitpick, but it's hardly noticeable. Everyone seems to be making a fuss of the display's 3840 Hz ultra high frequency PWM dimming, but as impressive as it sounds, it's not a feature noticeable by human eyes unless you really have a very sensitive eyes that you can see the display refreshing in real time. But yeah, it only means it's going to be a little bit harder to see the screen refreshing in real time unless you're trying to record the screen with a camera like this. What I did notice was the colors of the display. For an AMOLED, this isn't as punchy as other AMOLED phones. It's also set in vivid mode in the display settings, and there's only one more option, so there's really not much you can do with it. But that doesn't mean it's a bad display. This is still a sharp-looking 1200p display that can reach up to 1600 nits outdoors. That's right, it has a slightly higher resolution, but despite all that, the battery is still solid in this phone. I do have my refresh rate set at 120 Hz all the time, maximum resolution, auto brightness, and all. I can easily reach 5 to 6 hours of screen time with 1.5 day battery. It's a 5000 mAh cell, and the 66 watts supercharge is capable of reaching up from 3% to 20% in just 5 minutes. A full charge will take around 55 minutes, which is still under an hour, and for a curved screen, I never noticed palm touches except when I had certain tap targets on the edge, like adjusting a widget or an icon. It goes to the next page instead of moving the icon. But overall, I never felt like the screen was inferior to other displays, and the in-screen scanner, although on the slow side, was still accurate and reliable. And you could always set the always on display to actually always on, so that's nice. You can do that on other devices. Also, this is the first curved phone that shipped with a rubber screen protector. Usually it's plastic, but I do like that it's rubber, and I didn't notice it until I said to myself that it felt soft when using the screen. As far as the build and display go, Honor 90 has an edge to stand out amongst the crowd. Its technical features are slightly higher than the rest. It even has eSIM support. Then we have one of the highlights of this phone, the 200 megapixel Samsung camera sensor. It is replacing the 50 megapixel of last year's model. Although it's unfortunate to see the 50 megapixel ultra-wide camera go, the selfie camera has been upgraded to 50 megapixel, and it's also capable of recording up to 4K video like I said earlier. More on that later though. But finally, it's so good to see 4K recording on both the main and selfie cameras, even though the most consumers probably don't even know how to use it. Still, I'm happy to see this feature on upper mid-range phones. In all actuality though, I think as we keep on reaching high megapixel numbers on smartphones, the less we see the return, and it's not that obvious on top tier flagship phones. It's more obvious here with the lower end ones. So, with Honor 90's 200 megapixel sensor, it's also doing pixel binning, meaning the default photos you get are 200 megapixel binned to 12 megapixel. So each photo you capture averages 4 to 5 megabytes, and a full 200 megapixel photo is around 35 megabytes. As far as the quality goes, the photos that are in perfect lighting conditions look great. That's given already as far as smartphone camera goes, but I was expecting more when it comes to two things: challenging lighting conditions and skin tones. Honor's image processing goes a little too hard to try to make the photos look good. There's too much HDR going on. It's trying to expose everything to the point the image looks too processed or edited. Honor goes hard with its noise reduction that it loses details in the smallest parts of the photos, which usually is just fine with smartphone cameras, but this is a 200 megapixel sensor. However, if you want to clean up your images, remove the artificial sharpening and a bit of processing from Honor, you definitely have to use 200 megapixel mode or high-res mode in the camera app. You do need plenty of perfect lighting to get the best out of the photo, but when you do, it's worth it. I do like the shots I get in low light, I have no complaints there. Sometimes you don't even need night mode, especially if you're going for a natural look instead of an overly brightened look. But the 200 megapixel sensor here is fine. It's just that Honor has to dial down its image processing. The 12 megapixel ultra-wide is a step down obviously, but it's definitely better than the 8 megapixel of other phones. Photos here actually have decent sharpness and detail, but the selfie camera, I am a fan of the 50 megapixel selfie camera, and this isn't your typical wide sensor. This is an ultra-wide 50 megapixel sensor. Thanks to the hardware, your selfies don't have to suffer anymore from soft detail quality. Easily the best selfie camera I've ever tested. As far as videos go, I am a fan of the quality here. It seems like Honor's processing and the 200 megapixel sensor's updated features are doing a great job of keeping videos sharp, clean of noise, and natural looking. There is no 60 FPS option when shooting in 4K, but you can continuously record a video while switching between all cameras. There is also no OIS, but the software does a decent job of compensating with shaky hands when panning and tilting. If you walk with heavy feet, it's going to be obvious in the video, so you do have to watch out for that. But if you're just trying to record without moving, just trying to keep the frame steady, the stabilization does its job well. But before we move on, I also want to talk about the camera app. There are a lot of features offered by Honor, but I think it needs some changes. There are a lot of options in the camera app, and some of them could be a toggle in one mode. I mean, you have separate modes for HDR photo and HDR video. Then, portrait mode is different from aperture mode when essentially they do the same thing. I do like super macro though. It's using the 12 megapixel ultra wide to capture macro shots, and this might be the first time or second time I enjoyed taking photos of macro subjects. I also like the fact that there's a toggle to use motion photo. It's a good feature to have if you're trying to capture a moving subject because you can select a better frame afterward but at the cost of a slightly less detailed photo. The processing time though could be better. I understand that taking a 200 megapixel photo takes time to process, but if it's a regular 12 megapixel photo, you have to wait for a couple of seconds before you preview, and the camera hunts exposure most of the time. It doesn't know whether to expose the subject or the background, and it affects the final quality of the photos. But basically, those are the quirks I found with the camera app. Now, this is me speaking with a trained eye since I am a videographer, but if I'm to advise an average user, these cameras will do just fine. 200 megapixel is more than enough for what you need. The performance on Honor 90 is quite satisfying. I hardly saw lags, stutters, or slowdowns. There were a few hiccups during my use, but it's more on the software optimization, more on that later, but you really have a ton of headroom here. Like I said earlier, 12GB of RAM and the Snapdragon 7 Gen 1 chipset. Honor is marketing the chipset as Accelerated Edition because the CPU clock speed goes up to 2.5 GHz instead of 2.4 GHz. But in reality, if you go to Qualcomm's website, it states that the 7 Gen 1 chip does support up to 2.5 GHz. Regardless, it only means this chipset can assure you of consistent speedy performance. You can still play the latest games here without any problem. At the moment, I only play Star Rail and the new Metal Slug Awakening. Star Rail is really heavy when it comes to graphics processing. You could play at the highest settings, but the game would dip under 30 FPS. But in medium settings, it's a lot better, probably around 45 to 50 frames, which is more than enough for me for this type of turn-based game. This is not a gaming phone, mind you, but it definitely can play most of the games out there. As for Magic OS, I was already impressed with the Honor X9A from a few months ago, and that one was sporting a less capable chipset. But with the Honor 90, now that we had the extra juice to process the animation and whatnot, I am a fan of the performance of the software here. Actually, they recently pushed an update that added the control center a la iPhone, so you get the notification tray when swiping from the left and the quick functions from the top right. Magic OS though is starting to look less cluttered while offering a ton of features. There are a few annoying things though, at least for my use case, that I wish Honor would change. For example, the 3-finger gesture for a screenshot is double knock here. By far, only Honor and Huawei have implemented this gesture. While there are different gestures for different functionalities, there's no double tap to sleep, and then when you customize the home screen, you don't have a lot of options from the get-go. Usually when you long tap an icon, it gives you several options, but here you only have an install and shortcuts from the app itself. There's also no batch and install, and you can't make a folder from a group of apps you have selected. Magic OS is limited in this regard, but I do appreciate that there were only 5 app bloatware upon boot up. Honor also has its game manager, but like I said, it's also limited. You can only open a handful of apps on top of the game you're playing. There is no standby mode when leaving a game on autoplay. Also, a quick rant, not only here but also with others. Why do you even include an FPS counter when it's not really counting the FPS of the game? You're either putting fake numbers or the refresh rate of the game, which doesn't really represent the actual game. Anyway, there is one thing where Magic OS is one step ahead of the competition outside Huawei's HarmonyOS and Samsung's One UI, and that's Honor Connect. Basically, it's the platform used by Honor to connect and seamlessly communicate and transfer data between Honor devices, including but not limited to select Honor phones and laptops, aka Magic Books. Obviously, I couldn't test this feature since I don't have an Honor laptop, but there is easy projection that would connect this phone to an external display wirelessly or wired for a desktop-like experience. I still think Magic OS needs some organization and polishing when it comes to making things simple and intuitive, but as far as general performance goes, I have no problems here. Maybe except for the speaker and the haptic feedback. The vibration motor here is strong, but it's buzzy and not tactile. The single fire speaker trend is back here, although it's not as good as the dual speaker setup. This is definitely one of the good ones out there. Still, this is easily blocked when using the phone in landscape mode, so that free JBL speaker really comes clutch if you pre-order this phone, but basically that's the Honor 90. At this time, it's really hard to justify the price of a phone when we used to attain almost everything you could have on a phone at this price range. But times have changed and so does technology. But the Honor 90 offers a compelling and tempting package, and it's such a damn good phone. If you want that premium feeling phone with all the bells and whistles at the most affordable price point, Honor 90 should be on your list. So that's it for this one. Drop a sub or like if you feel like supporting the channel. As always, until the next one, stay safe.